Hi, hello, vanakkam, and welcome to yet another episode on Little's Law YouTube channel. Today, we are going to see about the variables, and in this video, we are going to see about how to use the list variable and what are the various other options and the uses, the advantages, and the limitations of the list variable. And before we move on to the video, this is me, your Vasant Shanmugam. I request you all to subscribe to our channel if you have not subscribed yet. Please do like, share, and comment your questions and feedbacks in the comment section. And to use any variables, we need a request. So let's first create a request. So for that, I right click on the actions, insert as child, and here I'm adding the actions, which is the transaction, and this is one more way of adding the transaction. We can either add this way or we can drag it from the actions folder which we find here. So for now, let me add the transaction folder, and it's always a best practice to have a transaction folder so that any transactions which comes under will be collectively known as a particular transactions response time. So let's name this transaction as 01 transaction, and let's add a child which is the request, and that's basically HTTP request. And let me add the request here. So this is a get request, and this is the request that is finding the product, and let me create it. So now we have the request ready for execution, and the business requirement, if in case we need to make changes or we need to do change in the product. So for that, we have various variables. In our previous video, we saw about the counter. If you have not watched yet, please do check the playlist or the description for the link. But in this video, we're going to see about the list, and let's see what is the difference between the counter and the list. So basically, this counter gives us an option to increment the value, which it does automatically, and we already saw about this automatically does an increment and the decrement by adding +1, and even -1 also will work. But when we come to list, we don't have any option that way, but we have an option to start the values from line, and here in this list we have to enter all the values manually in case if we are selecting this. So for example, if I want to add, or if we want to validate the 10 values of product, so I have to give us 1, and then to add the next value I'll have to click the add value, and then here I have to click number 2, and then I have to go to the add value 3, and then I have to click add 3. So this is too much of a time consuming work, and that is one of the limitations. But when we see about the advantages of having list, we have various different advantages. But before that, we have one more thing where we will have to rename the variable. So let's rename it to product number. And in case if you have used the number of variables, say for example you do not want to use the first first two values, so you can start from line number 3. So this is one of the advantage you can use, and this is one of the method we can use the variables. And for example, if you want to start from first, you can start from first, and in case if you want to start from third, we can do that. So we have options to do that. And then this is one more thing, so product number, and we will give as hash, for example. So that there is a reason behind that. So for now, let's create this and let's see how to replace this, and we will do a small validation, and let's come back and see what are the other options we have. So far we have renamed the variable name, and we have given 3 values, which is 1, 2, and 3, and then we are starting. Let's start from 1 for the first example. So let's start from 1 and let's see how does it work. And here, so we have already seen about all the other examples in the counter variable. If you have not watched it, please do check the link. And for now, let's start with each iteration, and let me click on OK, and let's click apply. So while replacing it, we'll have to remove the value, and we have to enter dollar symbol, open the flower bracket, and here we can see, so this is the table name and this is the column name. So product number is the table name or the variable name, and the column hash symbol is the particular column name which we have to choose. But if you see here, where else in the counter you have just only one column and you do not have any multiple columns option. So this is one of the advantages where we have for the list. So in the list you have an option to add multiple columns, which you'll see now. But before that, let's execute this test and see how does it work. So now the checking has started and we have 3 iterations to execute, and let's see how does it worked. So we have got 1 in the first iteration, 2 in the second iteration, and 3 in the third iteration. So let's now make another change, and let's see how does it work. So let's start the line with 2 and let's see how does it work. So here the value out of values is a cycle value. So even we start at number 2, let's see how does it work, whether it stops or like how does it start. So we have 3 iterations with 1 request. And here let's see. So since we have started with number 2, so the value has started with 2, 3, and since we have the values as cycle value, so we have again come back to the 1, and since we have 3 iterations, so it started basically with 2, 3, and 1, and we can see that here. So here we can see the first iteration has started with 2 and the second iteration is 3, and then it again went back to the first value, which is 1. So this is how the variable works. So let's now see what all the other things does it have, the list has. So here we can see import data set, and these are the predefined data set picker which NeoLoad gives us. So let's see what are all the examples we have or what are all the data sets we have. So for now, let's choose the country names here and let me click OK. So it will ask, since we have already a data set, it will ask us whether we can overwrite it. So I'm giving us yes. And here we can see all the countries in the world which comes in here. So you can see, in case if you are using an application where you need every country to be tested, we can use this particular data set. So let's move on to the next data set, which is the female first names. Let me click OK. So in case you have a requirement where you want to enter a random names but with a proper names section, so here we can use that. For example, if you are testing an application where you want to enter a list of names as part of the application, so you can use this particular data set instead of you entering it manually. So you can use this one. And then let's go to the third example, which is the last names. And here we can see, so these are the most common names, most common last names that are used, and this can be again very useful for you when you are filling an application with a last name. You can use this. So for example, you can use first name and a last name in this. So let's before that, let's add a data column. Let's add a column here. So we have added a column here. Let's import the data set now. So for now, let's choose male first names. But no matter what, how many columns you have, when you are resetting it, it will completely remove your data set and the new data set will be applied. So here again we could see these are the male first names, and let's now choose the street names. So far we saw the country names, female first names, last names, male first names, and then now we have come to street names. So in case if you are filling an application where you want to enter the address, you can use this particular names, the address names here. And then let's choose the street types. So this will take us to this particular street type. So this will come with the full name and the abbreviation of it. So we can see Fort and the abbreviation as FT. So there are like multiple examples of this, and we can also use this in case if you want to use it for any of our application testing. Instead of entering them manually, we can use them from the data set. Then let's come to the final example, which is the zip code. And if you want only the American zip code, we can enter this. If you work for any American client, and if you want to enter these zip codes, you can automatically get it from here instead of you go and search it from the computer and from the Google and get it and bring it here. So this actually gives us the correct state along with the city and the name. So these will help you in case if you are really interested to use them, but this is just a demo where you can find it, because most of the times we might not go through all these variables, and in case if you really want to use it, you can just use these variables. And again, when you want to replace, so let's see how do we replace them. So here we have got name, city and state, and let's now change it to America since they are American zip codes. Let's see how do we replace it. So for now, for an example, so if we want to replace this, here we could see America.city, and when we click on this, we could use America.city. And in case if you want to change it to America.name, we can select that, which is a separate column. And then in case if you want to use the America.state, and we can use that. So this is how we can use the values of the list, since we have got 3 different columns. So for each column you have to apply them separately. So the table name or the variable name dot the column name will take us to the correct value that we have to replace it. So let's now remove all these values, and to remove them, so just select this and click on remove column. We'll remove this column, and then let's remove this column, and again the last column. So let's delete this, and we'll create a new variable, the list variable. So here we will keep it as product number, and then this is as hash, and I'm giving us 1, and I'm adding the value to 2, and then I'm adding one more value 3. So now we saw about all these value change policies in our counter video. So now let's see the order option. What does this order option is going to do for us? So we have 3 different orders. One is a sequential, the other one is a random, and then any. So let's add few more values so that we can easily see them, like how does it work. So now we have 5 different values, which starts from 1 and ends up to 5. And then let's choose the sequential value for each iteration, and let's see how does this work. And before that, let's make a small change in the advanced while checking. So I'm changing it to 5 since we have 5 values. Let's start the checking. So the change we made here is we have got 5 values which will change on each iteration, and all the values will work sequentially. And let's see how does this work. And when out of values, the values will cycle, but since we have only 5 values, so there is no need of getting cycled. And let's see how does this work. So here the checking have started. Okay, so we have not properly changed it. So before that, let's change it once, since we forgot to update this. So we'll change it to a proper name, and then let's do the checking now. So now we have got the transactions completed. And here we can see the variables which have come in a sequential order. So let's make a small change to it. So we will change, we are not touching any other area. So we are not even changing it from starting the line, or we are not making any change in the value change policy, but we are changing it in the order. So we are changing it to random. And let's see how does this random order works. Test have completed. So here we can see the random order works in this manner. So it starts from 3, 5, 1, 2, and 4. And since we have got only 5 values, so all the values have got executed, but still they have come in a random manner. It starts with the first value in the random variable. So since we can see here 3, 5, 1, 2, 4. So all the values have got executed, but in a random fashion. So let's try the last one, which is any. So this is totally different from sequential or random. So any will be in any order. Let's run the test and see in what order does it gets executed. And again, this is one of the difference we have between the counter and the list, because in counter we do not have any options like what we have in a random order or any order. It runs only either in an increment manner or in a decrement manner, where we can start with the maximum value and then we have come till to the minimum value. We can change in that way, but there is no order of randomly distributing the value. It happens in a sequential manner, where if you are incrementing it by 1, it always increments by 1. If you want increment by 2, it increments by 2. And if you want to decrement by 2 or decrement by 3, it works in that way. But in list, you have 3 options. So we have to use based on what our requirement is. And this is the advantage of again using the list, where we can define what values we have and we can define how can we use them. So let's now go to the test and see how does it executed. So here we can see the any have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it can be of any different values, and that is how this variable manager for the list works. And again, we know how does this top the test work. So in case if there are no numbers, we have already seen that. So anyways, let's run it once more. So we have got 1 to 5, and then we are starting from 1, and let's check it once. So we'll run it from sequential, and then when out of values, we will stop the test. And here we have 5, so we'll start at 7 since we have only got 5 variables. Let's see how does this work and how does this stop the test. So here we can see all the 5 numbers have got executed, but the 6th iteration have started since it is out of values, and that is the same what we saw for the counter, and the same works for the list as well. So whenever there are out of values, the test will stop. And let's do one more change. So what if we do it in a random? So whether we'll see how does this work. So if we are running with a random and we have 5 values, and let's see how does this work, whether it iterates or whether it stops after the 5th iteration, and in what order do the variables gets executed or the variables get accessed. So here we can see, so this is the random fashion, but again for any value, so even though it executes in a random fashion, but still the start test gets stopped, and that is how the, the random order works. So let's now make a small change. So we will start the test from the fourth line in a sequential manner, and we have 5 iterations. So let's see how does this work. So here we can see that the test has stopped after 2. So we have got 2 values. So and we have the order of sequential, and these are the last 2 values, and when we get the values to stop, and when we reach the maximum values, when out of values, the test gets stopped. So we have to design our test based on the viability. So and again we have to design our test based on what are the out of values. So if we start from the test from the last or the value before that, and we have to make sure whether we have enough number of values, and we are also supposed to check the out of values here. So let's make one more change. So we will start the test from even the fifth variable, and we'll cycle the values like this in a sequential manner, and let's see how does the test executes. So here we can see that it started at the last value, and then again it went back to the first value in the table, 1 2 3 4, and again it comes back to 5. So that is how the list variable works, since we are executing in a sequential order. So I think we have discussed almost about every aspect of the variable manager. And then we have again we have few more options here. So this is the copy or the duplicating of the variable. So if we click on duplicating variable, we get an exact replica of that variable. And in many cases where if we want to make a change, we normally does this, and then we have this delete or remove the variable. So and then we have this test, where if we click on, we will get this regular expression where we can test the variable, and if we want to make any actions and check, we can do that as well. So we can even click on apply action and evaluate. So this will actually help us to test the variable. So these are some of the options we have. So I think we have seen almost everything in this. So let's do a quick recap before we close this video. So we have got this list variable where we can add a column. So we have options of multiple columns, any number of columns we can add, and any number of rows we can add here. And then we have this importing a row data set, which are the default list, which we have it here. And then we can add any number of columns, we can remove the column, and we can add multiple variables values, and we can remove the values. And again we have multiple value change policies, like on each use or on each request, on each page, on each user iteration, or for each virtual user instance. So these are the various options we have here. And then we have the variable value distribution policy, where we have this order of sequential or random or any. And also we have already seen this option, which is when the values are out of values, the values should recycle, or it should stop the test. And for this, return the value no value, which we have already seen that in the previous counter variable. So these are some of the options we have for the list, and also we have seen what is the differences between the counter and the list. So with that we come to an end. We will meet in another interesting variable video. Until then, it's bye bye from Vasant Shanmugam and Little Slaw.